Okay, if I could have conversations come to a good stopping point and to a close. Thank you. So thanks for really digging into those different activities and pulling that information out. So hopefully you had a chance to kind of dive into that strategy and kind of see how that could really structure toward your students practicing those skills they're going to need to defend. Does this essay really have all the elements of the argument that it's supposed to have, right? So hopefully you're able to, you're making some of those connections. So as a side note, I just wanted to say one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about is we talked about the claim, the reasoning, and the data. So also thinking about from a social studies perspective, right? So a little bit of a social studies lens here, maybe versus an ELA lens, is through Common Core, we know we wanted literacy embedded in science, social studies, and the other technical subjects. So specifically, what that looks like for social studies or science or history is this idea of what are the things that social studies or historians or economists, what do they look at when they look at articles or texts, right? So when I'm going to bring literacy to life in my social studies classroom, it isn't necessarily me totally adopting what the ELA folks are using for exact language. I have different language that connects to that same thing, and I have a few extra little things that fit into that, right? So what does that look like for me as a social studies person? Well, what I'll say to my social studies when I do social studies PD, since I get to wear both hats, is what do you do when you pick up the newspaper? Immediately you question the headline or look at the headline, you look at who wrote it, you look at the source, you look at the date. I mean, those are the different things that you instantly look at before you even begin to read what the article says. Our students don't do that. So as a social studies or as a whatever of the theme of geography or of social studies you want to get, the discipline of social studies you want to dig into, what are those questions or what are those ways of thinking and making those visible to our students and having them apply that to that. So one idea, back to that article of the week, I'm not reiterating it here because I already referenced it earlier, but article of the week is a real easy article, and what it does is it takes a current event and it just says take a stand or read what's in there, what stance do you take, and defend it from evidence from the text. It's that simple. And as a social studies person, if you're doing that, have them look at what was the date, who was the author, what was the location, all these different components, and talk to students about why that makes a difference in social studies and how it, and then have them connect that maybe to what you're doing. One person I was talking to, I said, just throw the article out there and force them to make a connection to the current topic you're covering. Maybe it's the current civilization. And really just see what they come up with. And it might not even work at all, but I bet they can find some kind of an angle out of a current event that would fit with something they may have recently read about in a civilization or the certain part of history that you're covering in your content area. So put that on the kids, see what they come up with. So from a social studies perspective, that's some of that different language and different ideas that we want to encourage them to pull out of their kids so that they aren't losing their identity as a social studies teacher, but still encouraging literacy because it's important. They wouldn't argue with that. It's just keeping that language and using that language and then helping kids make connections to what that looks like in ELA. So that's kind of a social studies perspective.
So for the science, when they do the claim evidence reasoning writing, they'll often refer to it as a scientific explanation. So if you look at the science and engineering practices of the standards that we'll soon be adopting, those are included. It's also currently in the Common Core literacy standards for science. So if your teachers are looking at that, our document, and also they're in our high school content expectations and our middle school content expectations that students will be answering questions with claim and evidence. In science, it might look a little different than what this looks like here. They might include things from readings, just like we've been looking at. They may do things, evidence from media. It could be evidence from somebody else's investigation that they have completed. It also could be an investigation they've done within the classroom, so actually pulling data from things that they've been able to experience in the classroom. So from the science aspect, we really do want kids, very similar to this, they can use the same graphic organizers even for the claim evidence reasoning. Their claim is going to be the answer to the question that they've been investigating as a whole, and then they'll use evidence from various places, whether it be the text or investigation. And then their reasoning will often tie back to scientific principles that they have learned while they were collecting their data It could be from a secondary type resource that supports what the kids are, figuring out. So it is very similar. It's the same structure that we want in science. And then with this also comes the discourse end of it, where then we want our students taking their explanations that they have constructed about the driving question and comparing them with others and sharing their data. And just like we sat and said, how comfortable were you with what you thought the painting was about? We want them doing that with their claims in science, where they say, after doing this, how confident are you in the claim that you have for the answer to your question? So actually this goes across all content areas very well. And we've seen that it seems to bring departments together when the science teachers start talking to the ELA teachers and they go, hey, we're doing this too. It's a consistent thing we want all kids to do. At the high school level, what's different is for science, we really are expecting also a rebuttal. So some people may think this because, and sharing some evidence that they have collected, that would be something that you'll see. But as for this, the graphic organizers, and then also in science, sometimes what we do for struggling kids is sentence starters. So it will start with, when you start, in sixth grade, my claim is, and then really just pointing out, and the evidence is this, and I think this because. The blog that Mark was talking about with Eric made a book on, he's from Wisconsin. He wrote a book about professional development for NGSS. And in there, he actually has some questions. Yes, do you have that up there? You want to go to that? There's questions that he has around the claim, evidence, and reasoning that kids can ask themselves when they're writing these, so that it just helps clarify to them what they should be thinking in their head. Are you pulling that up? You know what I'm talking about, the picture on the blog? Okay, thank you. Another thing that we've seen that worked really well for our teachers that were looking for these things, so in the middle, so how do you know, or what do you know, how do you know that, and how does the evidence support your claim? Those are good questions to ask students as they're going through this process. And then some teachers have found it useful if they have students highlight the claim, the evidence, and reasoning in different colors, so that as they're walking around and watching and noticing what the students are doing, they have a quick check of, is the student actually identifying the evidence that's supporting their claim versus mixing it all together. And we see a lot of that in science. So those are just a few things that have helped teachers in the districts that I've been working with.